Our resident lawyer, Despina Priala of boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay, is with us every Thursday to offer her legal expertise by providing some general advice on the latest hot topics. Of course, having experience spanning more than 25 years in the area of property and commercial law, she joins us now. Good morning, Despina.
Good morning, Brooke. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Despina. Great to have you with us.
So today we're
Thank you.
talking about body corporate record search and why it's so important. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yes, I can. So we deal with this all the time, acting for buyers, and it's all about the buyer in this instance. So when a buyer wants to buy a unit or a townhouse, they're buying into a body corporate, and that's obviously community living. I'm sure everybody understands what a body corporate is. Strata living. So to go into that type of complex, a unit or a townhouse, from our perspective and for the buyer, particularly if they're choosing to live there as their home and not to rent, so they're not going to actually occupy it themselves or be there, it's more really for the case, I think, that when you're choosing to live in a complex, you really want to know what the body corporate is doing. What's happening with the body corporate? And is it a place that you really want to live? So when you go under contract, the seller in Queensland particularly is only required to give you limited information in relation to that body corporate. And it's really limited to, well, what are your levies? What are you paying? And a bit of the insurance in relation to the body corporate. Other than that, you actually don't get to have any other information from the vendor at all. So a lot of buyers aren't aware that when you go under contract, you can actually order a body corporate record search. And in actual fact, what we do is when we vet contracts, which we talked about last week, and how important that is, if you remember, that we actually recommend to buyers that the contract itself is subject to the buyers getting a body corporate record search and being satisfied with that search within, say, a period of 14 days. And if they're not satisfied, to actually give them a right to terminate. So we draft that condition for buyers and we ensure it goes into that contract if they agree that they want it. And then we go through this process of explaining to buyers from the beginning, well, what does it mean? What is this search all about? So that's why I thought we'd talk about it this morning.
Yeah, for sure. It seems very important. So when a buyer is ready to buy, does that mean they should go to you first before signing any contract and get this research or this particular record in their hands before they sign their life away?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we normally don't get it beforehand because the practical side of getting a body corporate record search is this, that we don't actually do the search ourselves. You actually have to get a body corporate consultant who does these searches all the time. They actually go and physically inspect the records of the body corporate that are held, usually by the committee, and they actually go to the place where the records are kept, and they actually go through an abundance of documentation to then provide a report, that's quite thick for us to have a look at, for the buyer to have a look at. Now, that all takes time. So generally, we don't do it before. We say, let's make the contract subject to that happening. So as soon as the contract is signed, the parties are bound, we take steps to get that report ordered. And then so we can have that report, say, in the first week of the buyer signing the contract. Really important. So from the listener's perspective and buyer's perspectives, why do we need to get this search? Why is it recommended? So a body corporate record search is going to give you information that you don't have from the seller. For example, it's going to give you a summary of, well, how harmonious is the building? So when you have a body corporate and there's lots of people living together, if there are complaints, various complaints over the years, who knows? There could be dog complaints, there could be other complaints, noise-related issues, just people not complying with the bylaws. All of those things usually are tabled in meetings. So there's going to be a record of it. So there'll be a record of, well, over the years, how harmonious is this complex or not? So you want to know that when you're going to move in, to say, well, is there a whole bunch of people in this complex that are just constantly causing problems or not? So you can see that's quite an important thing to know.
Being on the Gold Coast, you would have a very good understanding of what's good property, hot property, and don't touch it.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yes, I don't live in all these complexes. I don't know. So that's why we order this body corporate record search, and we go, okay, well, what's happening in this building that the seller may not know because maybe they're an investor and they don't live there, or they don't want to tell you.
Sure.
Right? So that's an important one, the harmony of the building. Okay, so that's really, really important. The other thing, another example is if there are ongoing building defects, particularly in those buildings that are, say, 8 or 10 years old, because that's when you start to see these building defects come through. So if there are issues, it's going to be tabled at the body corporate meetings, and it's going to have a record of it. So if there are people complaining of, water leakages on balconies, other defects in the building itself,
Concrete
those
cancer.
those will be recorded in meetings, because if they've got to be rectified, got to call a meeting, you've got to put quotes forward, the body corporate has got to deal with those issues because they're problems. And then if you order a search, then you'll see over a period of time if there are problems, and if there are, how well does the body corporate deal with it. And you can see that from reading all the minutes of the various meetings, because some body corporates are very proactive and they get onto things straight away, and that's what you want. And some body corporates, it's quite evident from the meetings, oh yeah, we'll get around to it. Yeah, we'll get around to it. Maybe next meeting, and nothing gets done for over a year. So those are the things you really want to know about.
Yeah, 100%. And I've heard before that body corporate records can be denied in terms of accessing these records. Is that possible?
No. If you've heard that, it's probably a misunderstanding somewhere along the way about the circumstances. So if it's under the legislation in Queensland, I dare say it's the same in New South Wales. If you request a body corporate record search, you are entitled to that as a buyer of an interest of a lot in a building, in a body corporate. So you are entitled to order that search, and you're entitled to have someone go to the body corporate records where they're held and to conduct an inspection of the records, and then to compile a report for you as the buyer. So no, your rights aren't denied there at all. And as an owner of a lot, you can certainly obtain that information as well. That's not a problem. So another example is how financial the body corporate is. And that's a big one. And I dare say over the years you might have read articles about it being quite a controversial issue about how financial we call the body corporate, how much money do they really have, and is there, for example, or are there problems that the body corporate has to deal with at a monetary level, such as litigation, right? So say if there was a record of pending litigation or litigation in progress because the body corporate has a dispute, the body corporate has to have funds to deal with that litigation. And that's something that you want to know as a buyer coming in, because if it's a trouble body corporate, like in trouble financially, or there's trouble looming because of litigation, you want to get to the bottom of that, because it may mean that your levies are going up. Those are the things that you want to know as a buyer.
Contracts from buyers and vendors with property, and also sellers. It can be a minefield. What you need to know. More with Despina Priala from Priala Legal next.